So first, the 2023 budget was running in 2024, and now the 2024 budget is going to be running until the end of 2025. Meanwhile, supplementary budget cycles are also running concurrently. What implications does this multiple budget cycle have for budget performance, debts, inflation, and the overall economy? Well, in spite of these nettlesome questions, the Senate on Tuesday approved an extension, passing the legislation through first, second, and third readings in a single sitting. APC Senator Solomon Adeola, who chairs the Senate Committee on Appropriations, said the additional time was needed to complete several ongoing projects captured under the 2024 budget. So how much does this repeated extension of the implementation period of Nigeria's national budgets smack of fiscal indiscipline? How much does it undermine this country's public finance framework? How badly does it compromise the National Assembly's oversight responsibility? And what are the overall implications for Nigeria's economy? Well, for more on this, I'm joined now in the studio by the Director of the Public Sector Initiative at the Lagos Business School, Professor Franklin Ngwu, who's also a Professor of Strategic Management. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you for
coming in.
Thank you.
Just explain to us in simple terms that the person on the street can understand why repeatedly extending the implementation period of the national budget is not seen as a good thing by many economists.
I think the first thing to do is to even briefly understand what is a budget. And of course, you know, a budget is a framework through which we assess or compare revenues and expenditure. And maybe later on we can discuss about the history of budgeting that started in the UK through the fight between the bourgeoisie and the feudal ruling class. So this repeated extension summarily reduces or questions the effectiveness of governance on both the executive and the National Assembly. Because when you keep repeating and extending, the functions you are supposed to do and importance, the very, very important benefits of a budget more or less been eroded. And, you know, so the question is, are we really running a good government? Is the National Assembly aware of their functions and the powers that they have to use the budget to drive sustainable development in Nigeria, inclusive growth and all that? So in answer, it's not a good thing. And all the questions you listed, more or less in the affirmative.
So when the Nigerian government, in cahoots with the National Assembly, does it repeatedly, would you agree with those who say that it smacks of fiscal indiscipline and that it badly compromises the National Assembly's oversight responsibility? Because one would have thought that if implementation fails, it is the National Assembly's duty to demand accountability, not to keep extending the timeline.
Certainly. Of course, you remember that during the PMB's regime, we came to a kind of reform that enabled the budget to be sent in October or early November, so that they have at least 30 days before the end of, so that we can now have January-December cycle of a budget. Surprisingly, we are now back to a situation where a single budget is extended 3 times, like 2023. 2024 is now being extended in 2025 and to the end of 2025. So, as I said earlier on, the origin of budget is based on when the capitalist system, the bourgeoisie, started fighting to get more rights from the feudal ruling class. And as they got more rights, they now said that the parliament must and should question, assure, approve the revenues that are paid by the citizens. So that because we contribute through taxes, so that we have to know the revenues that we've collected and then the expenditures the government wants to do. They have to list it, and because they are representing us in National Assembly, they are doing our work by questioning line by line what the government wants to spend. So in this instance where budgets are being extended, it means that the National Assembly are not performing their functions, their assigned functions, effectively. And of course, in terms of governance indicators that is being listed by World Bank, rule of law, government effectiveness, regulatory quality. The number 2, government effectiveness, Nigeria has been performing poorly. So with this kind of scenario, it means that our performance has gone further down. And it also means that the executive, you have to also understand the reasons for this extension. Is it because that we don't have resources?
Yes, I was going to ask you that question. Why are they actually extending it and extending it again?
So if you listen to the Senate or the National House of Reps, they said that possibly that we don't have resources that to execute what they have in the budget. But the question then is, how did they prepare the budget in terms of preparing a budget when you know you don't have the revenue? So there's something that is called a balanced budget.
Yes.
So what you want to execute, you should be sure that you have the money to do it. So it works like that. Or you even do zero budgeting. But this time around that we are having supplementary budget, you're having 2024 budget, you're extending it, and you are saying that we don't have money to execute 2024 budget. And there's also news going around that the 2025 budget, we are now in June, and they've not even started implementing.
I've heard that story.
So the question then is, what are we really doing? We are in 2025. We're extending 2024 budget to December. And remember that they extended it to June. Suddenly, a few days to the end of June, you rush again and say you want to extend it again. And National Assembly is supposed to say, remember these are, if it's a corporation, the board of directors will call the CEO and said, what is going on with our target? What is going on with our plans? So what we expect the National Assembly to do is to call the executive and say, what is going on? Is it that the revenue is not there? Why did you now list all these items in an open, transparent, accountable way? Budgeting is, let me use the term, is a democratic financing tool through which the people, the masses, Nigerians, are supposed to question what is going on, because all of us are contributing to that budget because it's our taxes. So that's what they call democratic financing framework. It's also a kind of political democratization that all of us are involved. So for the National Assembly to be just approving extension, it's time that Nigerians need to question and say, what is really going on? Because it's not right. Because first of all, even if you come to the economic implications of inflation, confusion.
Yes, I was going to come to that for you to explain to us what the implications are from an economic, because I've heard people talk about debt, I've heard people talk about the potential for inflation, and so on.
So if you look at inflation, for instance, so as I said before, budget is revenue and expenditure. What we've been running in Nigeria is a deficit budgeting. So we said that we're going to do list items in terms of what we want to execute, but we don't have money to execute it. So what do? We borrow and now start executing it. So the senators are saying that maybe we don't have enough resources to execute this one. So maybe the money is coming now.
Yeah, but why are they saying maybe? I mean, shouldn't there be greater certainty from them before they extend?
That's what I'm saying, that they are not performing the oversight responsibilities very, very well. So if they said that money is coming in now, and remember, we have 2025 budget. So hopefully they are releasing the recurrent expenditure aspect of the 2025 budget. And now you have the 2024 capital budget being released as well. And you now possibly also have the 2025 budget being released as well. So it means that the money in circulation will expectedly increase. And you are chasing the same...
And that could have inflationary
pressures. And of course, as well, when you do this, you also create a room for insertion or omission of different projects that will have been executed in 2024. Now in 2025, the one that was executed in 2025 might actually be removed, but the money has already been budgeted. So it creates a lot of confusion, which requires more diligence, more accountability, more transparency on both the executive and National Assembly.
Right, and there is a sort of an element of this, because I mean, you mentioned the fact that the responsibility of the National Assembly is oversighting these things, and they don't appear to be doing it. Would it be fair to say that national budgets are also supposed to be time-bound, which is why they are called 2023, 2024, or 2025 budget? They're supposed to define a particular fiscal year.
Historically, budget has been annually, as the case may be, in many countries. Because, you know, what you plan to do in 2024, like for companies or corporations or even individuals, you normally say, by January next year, I'm going to achieve X, Y, Z
Yes.
in 2026 or in 2025. So you finish that year and say, what did I do and what did I not do? Sometimes in Christians, some people will start singing, do something new in my life. Because when you've looked at the last year, you didn't achieve what you wanted to achieve. The next year, you now say, I'm going to do this. So historically, budget is supposed to be implemented in a year. If, for instance, you did not implement all you wanted to achieve in 2020, in that fiscal year, you might just, not something that's supposed to be regular. You might say, okay, in the first quarter of the next year, I will do my best to finish the execution of this budget. But in a situation where it becomes a habit of now extending, it's not good for Nigeria. It's not good for Nigeria. It's not good for the government. It's not good for Nigerians. It's not good for investors. It's not good for monitoring.
And it's not good for development.
It's not good for development.
I mean, if you're supposed to, execute projects that will boost the economy, and you're not doing that, then obviously...
So invariably, the reforms being implemented might not even achieve the intended consequence or the intended outcomes, because you are doing things in a very haphazard and arbitrary ways, which confuses governance.
Right. I mean, the assumption at the moment appears to be that the government doesn't have the money to fund the budget. But could these extensions also be evidence of poor execution capacity by the ministries, the agencies, the departments, and so on?
MDAs. It cuts across these areas that you've listed, because the budget is normally prepared by the executive and sent to the National Assembly to question the items, to question the revenue, to question the expenditure. So it shows weakness in planning. It shows weakness in execution. It shows weakness in oversight. It shows weakness in the overall governance system.
Right.
Because in reality, there's something that they call increasing budget. So you do 2024 budget.
Right.
You get to December. You assess how you've done. You now add a little bit on 2024 budget. That's why it will now be your 2025 budget. But in a situation where 2024 has finished, you are still implementing it, you announce 2025. And if you look at 2025 budget, we are borrowing so much.
Yes.
We borrowed before, we are still borrowing. So if you look at the way our debt is increasing, it is quite disturbing. Remember that we were told that subsidy is being removed because it will help us to save more money and execute more projects. But now subsidy has been removed. We are even borrowing more as compared to when subsidy was there. But in terms of the outcomes, in terms of budget execution, many people are arguing that maybe we are having maybe 30% or less than 30% of execution of what has actually been budgeted. So it's not good for now. As I said, it's not good for now. It's not the right way to go.
But I mean, running a multiple budget cycle is not always a bad thing, is it? Because it allows for the simultaneous existence of multiple budget periods where the one that is the current year is in the execution phase, and while others that are future years are in the planning and approval stages. I mean, I understand that this approach allows for continuous financial planning and management, and that it ensures that resources are allocated effectively and aligned with longer-term goals.
I mean, Charles, those are very good narratives. It depends on how you look at it. Nigeria is not listed among the countries that can be said to be good in key governance indicators, including rule of law, government effectiveness, regulatory quality, voice and accountability, control of corruption, and all that. So what you are painting, or the scenario you are
is it applicable to a system that works
exactly.
properly? Yeah.
It is applicable to a system where you say that all these governance indicators are at very top. But not when you're already performing so badly in key governance indicators, and you are modeling and confusing and making the whole thing more complex, more confusing, and it doesn't work. So what we are supposed to say is, how do we return back to the budgeting system needs proper reform, proper rethinking to do things rightly. It is important that we start doing things rightly in Nigeria. It's not when we do things wrongly, we now start rationalizing the wrong behaviors or the wrong ways of doing things with different English or different approaches, as the case may be.
Right.
You can, of course, you can explain so many things, but in reality, are you really making logical sense in what
Yeah.
in what
Yeah,
you're
that's a
explaining?
very good point. And that brings me to the question of what your assessment would be of Tinubu's performance from an economic point of view, as people who are people who really crunch the numbers and look at what's going on in society. His performance in the last 2 years, and perhaps you could also give us a sense of what your expectations and what your priorities would be looking ahead to the next 2 years, and what you think the realistic possibilities are.
If I look at the last 2 years, I will say that Tinubu's government comes across as a government that has good intentions, but highly, highly distracted in terms of the way they do things, in terms of coordination, in terms of policy announcement, in terms of policy execution. So remember the two major policies or reforms that we've had: removal of the subsidy and floating of the naira. These two policies are not supposed to be announced and implemented at the same time. They're supposed to be properly sequenced. And the way it was announced and the way it was executed created a lot of confusion. Personally, as an economist, I support removal of the subsidy, but not the way it was done. So it was announced, but there was no proper planning. And you did it, then suddenly you floated the naira. Before the government came in, the give and take, the value of naira should be about 800 and something, which was the black market rate. So it means that the real value of naira at that time was about 800 and something naira. But because of the way the naira was floated and everything, pressures and all that, the thing went up to 162,000 as the case, and cost inflation, different economic issues. So there seems to be good intentions, but there seems to also be lack of coordination and lack of follow through to ensure that this is achieved. So if we ask now and say, the reforms, what is the focus? What is the vision? Where is it taking us? We are not even sure. I was thinking, many Nigerians believe, that the main reason for these reforms is to enable productivity. 2 years down the line, we are not sure where we are with regards to productivity. 2 years down the line, we are not sure where we are with alleviating poverty. We are having more people moving into multidimensional poverty. 2 years down the line, is inflation better? Not really. 2 years down the line, unemployment, how is it doing? 2 years down the line, insecurity. So these are things that we need to follow and check and say, how are we doing in these aspects? It seems many Nigerians are believing and arguing that while the government might have good intentions, they seem to be distracted and they seem to be enjoying distractions.
Okay, well, based on that analysis, because we've got less than 2 minutes left to this chat, look forward for us to the next 2 years. Your expectations, what the priorities ought to be, and what the realistic possibilities are.
Of course, Nigeria has immense potentials. So we are supposed to actually be achieving, if we go back to budget, we're supposed to be achieving budget surplus, not deficit, as the case may be, because of what we have. So I expect the government and the president to sit back and say, I've done 2 years. What are Nigerians saying? How am I performing? The key indicators, how are they doing? The reforms, how are they doing? And do proper regulatory impact assessment, which the answers are already public knowledge in terms of the way the government is performing. And I'll say, is it necessary for me to rejig the people working with me to deliver outcomes to Nigeria? And also show more prudence in accountability, in management of the resources of the government, and also prioritize. And then fourthly, is to properly engage the governors, because we have federal government, state government,
Indeed,
and local government. And these 3 tiers of government are supposed to be working hand in hand to change Nigeria. There seems to be too much attention and blame on the federal government. Many of us are ignoring or excusing the governors, but they have immense budget, they have immense powers, they have immense resources that they can use. So I expect the president to convene, he has the convening power, and say, as I'm coming to your state, we have to have a meeting, regions and all that, to say, Southeast, what will you be producing? Southwest, what will you be producing? Not Central, what will you be producing? Northwest. And at the end of the day, let's make Nigeria make it possible that things will change and we have inclusive development.
Very good, very wise advice there. Thank you very much indeed. Professor Franklin Ngwu is the Director of the Public Sector Initiative at the Lagos Business School. He's also a Professor of Strategic Management. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
That's it for this edition of Arise Prime Time. Join us again tomorrow. From me and the entire team here in Abuja, bye-bye and thank you for watching.